everyone. Welcome to Reporting In, the TYT network show dedicated to the topic of investigative journalism, to reporting, political reporting, all kinds of reporting. We try to get the story behind the story, if at all possible. And one of our frequent guests is returning today. I'm excited to have her on. It's Emma Vigeland of Rebel HQ, formerly known as TYT Politics. Emma, thanks so much for making the time for us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Malcolm.
And for those the few people who are watching who don't know who you are what I consider TYT's star reporter. I'm there. I'll say it. I'll say it to you right to your face. I said it to Ken Klippenstein. I said it to Ryan Grimm. I'll say it to you too. No, of course not. That's not
makes
true.
It mean a little bit less.
No, it's not true. I'm lying about them. You're the only one for me, Emma, and I appreciate that you come on to talk about politics with me because I really appreciate your insights and I think it's valuable for the audience. So let's get right into it. This week, one of the topics I really wanted to talk to you about is that troublemaker, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who has been making a lot of stir. She's been causing a lot of stir in Washington since she arrived, even before she arrived. She's also, let's be honest, your BFF.
She's causing a lot of stir with all those Instagram stories, that commie.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's well known that Stalinism was linked to excessive use of Instagram. So people are on the right are correct to be worried. But when I say she's your BFF, I'm joking, of course. But you have been following her political career since essentially its outset. You were talking to her when, and others at TYT, but you particularly, because you're in New York, she's running in New York, you were on the AOC story well before anybody else in the media was. And I'll just ask you, did you get a sense from her back then that this was a race that really had a chance to succeed? Or were you like, I like her, she's great, but she can't beat Joe Crowley, he's too powerful?
No, I mean, I think I had a sense that she would be successful. I was hopeful that she would win going into election night, but still, election night in June when she defeated Joe Crowley, but still, seeing it happen, witnessing it was an incredible experience for me. When I met her, I just thought she had this star quality. She was young, charismatic, articulate about every single issue. Some candidates just have the one issue that they want to talk about and are not really educated on others, but she really had a great sense of the progressive movement. She wanted to talk about Medicare for all, immigration, foreign policy, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, the media. She really just was someone who I completely enjoyed spending the day with, staying in touch with her campaign. And, it's really wonderful to ride her coattails because she's a huge celebrity now. I never saw this coming. I thought she might defeat Joe Crowley, and I thought she had a good chance. I wouldn't say it to people because I was so afraid of jinxing it. But I swear I'm an honest person. I really did think she had a good shot. It's been incredible to watch her ascension, and it's really nice that she still makes time for me, even though CNN reporters are shoving mics in her face and asking her, have you been able to find your way around the city? Really pressing questions about that.
That is pressing. I mean, that's a real concern. I mean, she might be, how could she get Medicare for all passed if she's getting lost on the red line? You're talking about the city, Washington, D.C., right?
Yes,
yeah.
They were really interested in that topic because that's what matters to the American people and to their daily lives.
A lot of people have equated her win over Joe Crowley to Dave Bratt, who recently lost his race, but when he defeated Eric Cantor on the Republican side. And I just wonder how many reporters asked Dave Bratt when he got to D.C. if he was having difficulty getting around. Or how many photos they took of him from behind saying, boy, this guy looks, well, I don't know what the hell they would say about Dave Bratt from behind. But the treatment she has gotten, let's just say, is sui generis, and unlike most incoming freshman congressmen, and a lot of it is inherently sexist. There's no two ways about it. But I don't want to talk. But before we get to that, I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned it earlier, her Instagram and social media, and that's something that a lot of people have been keying on with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, is how she's a millennial and she's captivating a whole different demographic, and she knows how to relate to young people in ways that the older generation doesn't. And is this a legitimate assessment of her, or is there a bit of dismissal from the mainstream media who, they're on Twitter, and beyond that they don't know how to do social media. So are they really singing her praises, or are they kind of saying, oh, isn't that cute how she's on Instagram?
I think it's more of the latter, but it's a little bit of both. I mean, I am a millennial. I'm younger than AOC, and I can only use Twitter. So don't pigeonhole those media reporters. I'm like so bad at Instagram that it hurts. I shouldn't even have one. But I think that there is some condescension and there's a frustration. If you saw Cenk's media appearance on Reliable Sources, of both Olivia Nuzzi, who is a interesting reporter in DC who likes to talk about drama, and Brian Stelter were basically saying, well, she's circumventing the media and she's going straight to her voters, and how can the media hold her accountable? And my response to that is really, well, when politicians come on your shows, it's not like they're being aggressively challenged in a way that they don't recognize. They're being challenged from an establishment bias, and oftentimes you don't fact check them. So it's very similar to them going on Twitter and going on Instagram and using their social media as a tool, except that now she doesn't have to worry about the gatekeepers on CNN, and she's not even necessarily trying to reach your audience, where the average viewer of CNN is incredibly old. I mean, it's even older on Fox News, very old on MSNBC as well. So why are you getting your figurative panties in a bunch that she's not coming on there when, that's the audience that you're trying to reach isn't really interested in her and giving her a fair shake, and she's not really trying to reach your audience either.
So she's not interested in going on a show that is going to be followed by a series of catheter ads? Is that what you're saying?
I would assume so. I have no inside information about that, but it has to do also with how the media views themselves, and they really view themselves as holding power accountable, except that they're just not transparent about their own bias, which is an establishment bias. And because she's so anti-establishment, and Trump is anti-establishment, by the way, they're hard on them in different ways. But, I have no problem with politicians going to media sources that are more favorable to them, or, speaking directly to their voters via Twitter. I mean, articles and media members can fact check them in post. It's not a massive requirement for AOC to Skype in to Brian Stelter's show.
Well, I mean, you have a two-pronged criticism. One is that they come at you from an establishment bias, so you're not really holding politicians accountable in the way that they imagine they are. But then the real dagger in the side, the real shiv, is your audience is too old and she doesn't care about them. But it's true. I mean, but Cenk didn't say that when he was on Reliable Sources, and that would have been, if you've watched that video, Brian Stelter's look when Cenk suggests that the media promotes candidates who have more money, and that encourages candidates to pursue money, and so there's a feedback loop there. Brian Stelter's quizzical look, like, we would never, that doesn't make it's. It was clear that he never heard that before, and Stelter's
not even that bad, right? Like Stelter's one of the better ones, but it's a disease.
And let's not forget that when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez went on Jake Tapper's show and he was asking her about Medicare for all, he was not honest with her. He was not straightforward. He didn't prepare her in any way. He blindsided her with questions that she was not in any way prepared for. And which is okay. I mean, you can argue that's okay, but he was not honest about it, because he was claiming to her, for example, that he was citing numbers from liberal activist groups about Medicare for all, and included among them the Mercatus Center, which is funded by the Koch brothers. So I think the media needs to do some soul searching about how they interact with what they're doing when they claim to be holding the politicians' feet to the fire. As you point out, it's really more their establishment bias showing, and they need to. So she has good reason to be dismissive of them, I would just suggest. But whether they're going to do that or not is another matter. But let's move on to talking about another aspect of the stir that she has caused, which is she's she gets a lot of criticism from more mainstream Democrats now who are saying she needs to stay in her lane. She needs to be a backbencher. She needs to learn the ropes. She doesn't know what to do, and before she can start making demands. And then on the progressive side, those of us who feel like we supported her and got her elected or helped get her elected, we're saying you need to be aggressively pushing progressive objectives like Medicare for all and a Green New Deal, et cetera, et cetera. And how would you rate her performance so far, anyway, in sort of navigating these competing magnetic interests pulling her in different directions?
I mean, A+, I would say. I think that she's honestly doing better than even Bernie Sanders does, who is someone who obviously navigates the establishment as well in the Senate. But she's being even more aggressive. And the fact that when I went to cover the Sunrise Movement's protest, which she briefly joined in on, the fact that she went and spoke to the protesters, not really specifically about Pelosi, but just more about kind of she spoke about Pelosi, but in a positive way, saying, she listens to organizers. This is a good thing. So she's both praising Pelosi and supporting protesters going after Pelosi. And it worked, right? So Pelosi was way more open to climate change talks. And now that Pelosi got the support of more progressive members of Congress for her House speakership, she was just reelected and now will be Speaker of the House. She made concessions in terms of committee assignments for progressives. So there was some progress to be made. Now, I understand a lot of progressives' frustrations. Barbara Lee lost narrowly in the House caucus chair race. AOC endorsed Barbara Lee. So not everything's going to happen as quickly as we wish, but her voice is incredibly important. And as I mentioned earlier, I could not in my wildest dreams have foreseen how big she's gotten. And I feel very, lucky to have been a part of it, a small part.
So let's talk about the Nancy Pelosi speakership race. So do you think that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, along with other progressives, got as much as they possibly could have out of, in exchange for their support for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker?
Oh, no. I mean, committee assignments is not legislative priorities. I would love, Nancy Pelosi said, I'll support Medicare for all if you support me. I mean, there are over 100 members of the House Democrats that now support Medicare for all. So, or at least it was at the last tally. I'm not sure which outgoing ones left, and I have to do that tally again. But yeah, so I mean, I wish she had promised Medicare for all. I wish she'd promised a Green New Deal. I wish she'd promised college for all. But it's Nancy Pelosi. And until there's a Democratic president who's incredibly progressive, leading the policy priorities in that way, and there's a Democratic supermajority, we will not see Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer lead in that way. I mean, now we're seeing this pay-as-you-go pronouncement where Steny Hoyer and Nancy Pelosi are saying, well, we're going to, despite the fact that the Republicans just passed this tax cut that will increase the deficit by trillions, we're going to do a pay-as-you-go system, meaning like they're not going to pay it forward with a lot of these more expensive things like Medicare for all. They're just going to pay for things when they have the money to, which the Republicans never play by those rules, despite pronouncing themselves as fiscal conservatives. Why did the Democrats have to be the fiscal conservatives here? It's just outrageous, but Pelosi and a lot of the more traditional Democrats, if I want to put it kindly, are so terrified of being called reckless spenders. But you know what? The Republicans are going to call you reckless spenders anyway, and then they're going to be the ones that are spending recklessly and getting rid of revenue by giving tax cuts to the rich. So you might as well get some progressive policy priorities through.
Well, I mean, this is a critical question. So if you're progressive and you're supporting Nancy Pelosi, and it's not just like Nancy Pelosi is saying, well, we'll table Medicare for all for now, maybe we can consider it later, who knows. She's saying, no, I'm going to aggressively pass law, or we're going to pass PAYGO and the new 3/5 rule that she wants to impose for any new taxes on the lower 80% of earners, that these are essentially going to hamstring the Congress, so they could not pass. There's no way that Medicare for all could pass. And which as you point out, seems like terrible politics. She's playing politics of a different era. If she thinks anybody's going to care about PAYGO, all it's going to do is tie Democrats' hand behind their back. And so, for me personally, I'm a little frustrated with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the other new progressives who didn't hold Nancy Pelosi's feet to the fire a little more to demand more, because that's a thumb in the nose, or spit in the face, or whatever terrible metaphor, facially related metaphor you want to put it for Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer to do this to progressives after the blue wave. I mean, what is your response to a rise in Democrats in the House that put you back into power? Is to say, okay, great, now let's make sure we don't do anything with that. Let's not even give ourselves the possibility of doing anything with that. And for Nancy Pelosi to be so aggressively put this out there, is that what she's going to do? It seemed like almost a challenge to the progressives to say, okay, well, we're not going to support you if you're going to do that. So I wish that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the others had been a little more firm, because their support for Nancy Pelosi for Speaker, it seems like they got a little it's weak sauce, as Cenk Uygur would say. So yes. I don't know if you and I disagree about that, or if that's just a subtle disagreement between us.
I think we disagree, but I would say it's a little subtle in the sense that I think, if someone to the left of Pelosi had stepped up, you can't force anyone to run, but AOC had put out feelers there, as well as other progressives saying, Barbara Lee, run for Speaker, we'll support you, Barbara Lee, run. And then you could have shaved off a lot of the progressives to get maybe, get a plurality for Barbara Lee to be Speaker of the House. But Barbara Lee just lost the caucus chair. So maybe Barbara Lee knew the votes weren't there and she wanted to go with the easier route. And no one more progressive than Pelosi stood up. So what were they going to do? Not support Nancy Pelosi and support one of these blue dog, crazy third way Democrats who just funnel corporate cash into their gullets like it's a beer funnel? I mean, I don't know. That's a horrible image. But
you and I aren't doing great with the metaphors today, but we'll work on it for next time.
A little tough. But you also still have to work with these people on a day-to-day basis, and this is some of the frustration that I have. When I talk to some progressives who are to the left of me. I think I'm pretty leftist, but there are many people who think I'm a corporate sellout because I voted for Hillary Clinton in the general election. But you have to work with these people every day, and you can't completely alienate them if you want to actually get what you want to get done. Because sometimes I think we can get dragged into this personality fight and concessions, and I totally hear what you're saying with Pelosi basically spitting in the face of progressives. But AOC probably made some calculations. She's a freshman incoming congresswoman, and she just wanted to put pressure on her in one way, maybe not the other. Also, I would say that Pelosi's response to this blue wave would probably say, well, a lot of the progressive Democrats didn't really win, which is true. A lot of the more conservative Democrats won.
Well, that's the great thing about election results, is that everybody can always spin them to justify whatever. Oh yeah, this is exactly what I've been saying all along. No matter what the results were, Democrats didn't do this, or Democrats needed to do this. Probably, So that's Nancy Pelosi can find whatever justification she needs. We on the left can find the justification we need to push Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But one thing I will observe also, Emma, is that working at TYT, I don't know what you're talking about when you suggest that people who have differing political viewpoints have to learn to work together. That's crazy talk. That's not something I've ever experienced. Just because we have co-hosts on the main show who are Turkish and Armenian, I don't know what, that's nonsense. So, but here's my question relating to that issue specifically, which is that, for example, in 2009, progressives drew a line in the sand and they told Obama, look, we are not going to vote for any health care bill that does not include single payer. We refuse, we won't do it, so we need to have, not single payer, I'm sorry, a public option that doesn't have a public option. That was, they were a red line or whatever you want to call it. And then, lo and behold, the health care bill that passed and that they all voted for did not have a single or a public option in it. So progressives have a history, a long history, but also a recent history in the Democratic Party of getting log rolled and being forced to go along to get along, and that doesn't that has not had an analog on the right in terms of the right wing of the Democratic Party, where the blue dogs are not forced to swallow their pride and come along, and the way that progressives are. So that's what I wonder about. How do we change that dynamic? And it seems like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is she's an avatar for that. She's a representative of somebody who can change that. And her social media style being different, it suggests that she's not going to be the traditional progressive who comes into office breathing fire and then puts her tail between her legs and says, yes, I'll do whatever you want. But the vote for Nancy Pelosi, after Nancy Pelosi has spit in our face, suggests that there's log rolling going on. So what do we do as progressives? Isn't it our responsibility to hold Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's feet to the fire and say, you need to stick with the people, you got to go with the people who got you here? And I guess that's the question, is where we draw that line, because if we don't, the Overton window just keeps moving to the right.
Yeah, so I mean, I think she's honoring and being as authentic and, as progressive as she was when she ran. So I don't see her as going back on her voters in any way. But I do hear what you're saying. I think that really, unfortunately, the leadership or those progressive priorities have to start from the top, and to get traction in a Democratic Party who has internalized fear and corporatism and weakness so thoroughly that it's become everything about them, right? So that's what they embody.
So you're saying we got to get rid of Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer and all of them, because it's got to come from the top, and they're not going to do it.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. They're not going to do it, but mostly we need a progressive president in 2020, because if there's a progressive president with the bully pulpit saying these progressive priorities, the Democratic Party will have to follow suit. Republicans pretended that they weren't going to go along with Trump's policy priorities, and then they did them because he is the head of the Republican Party. And if Bernie Sanders is president, or Elizabeth Warren is president, or someone who is supportive of Medicare for all, the Democratic Party will follow suit, and the leadership will have to as well.
Is it because Trump is president, or is it because Trump still maintains popularity among like 85 to 90% of the Republican base, and he still has popularity in the base? And so to me, I would say it's not just Bernie Sanders being president, it would be Bernie Sanders being president, or someone like Bernie Sanders, like there's any such person, but also who has the excited base of support behind him or her, who is going to compel those other Democrats to go along. That's what's really pushing those other Republicans, I feel. It's not just Trump himself because he's president, it's Trump's base, the crazy people you talk to at those rallies, they're the ones they're afraid of, not Trump himself.
Well, yeah, that too, and that's why the progressive base has to become as formidable of a force as the Trump base. I know that's really hard to do because they're authoritarian by nature, and what's interesting about being a progressive or a liberal is that you're all about questioning power, so you're not going to be following power blindly. But I do think that there is potential. I mean, Bernie Sanders, when polled amongst Democratic voters, polls incredibly high. He polls incredibly high throughout the country. So what you need to get that kind of support behind your legislative agenda is populism, not centrism, not corporatism, and true populism. And I think that if the Democrats have the right candidate in 2020, that they can achieve that.
Well, I guess what I'm suggesting then, I don't think we're disagreeing really, but is that populism, that excitement, that energy coming from the progressive base, the way to manifest that now before the 2020 election is by staying to the left of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and those people, and holding their feet to the fire, and not when they compromise, which I know they have to do, but don't make it easy on them. Say, look, we're not happy with this compromise. I still support you, but we're not happy with it. Whereas I think the inclination, I love Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. You know her personally, and I mean, so it's hard. My inclination is to want to say, well, she's doing it, I agree, because she's a great person, and Bernie Sanders, same thing. But I think it's important for us as progressives to fight that internal battle and say, no, I have to hold her feet to the, because if we don't, nobody's going to. But there is going to be extraordinary pressure on her from the center, from the corporatist wing, to go along and get along. And if we're not a counterbalance to that, and we just say, yeah, you should go along and get along, vote for Nancy Pelosi, we'll put off what we need until later, then we aren't going to get the Green New Deal. We aren't going to get Medicare for all. We're not going to, those arguments aren't going to be made, and we're going to wind up with Joe Biden or Cory Booker as our nominee, and we're all going to have to go stick our heads in an oven. I mean, I like to end on a positive note. So, yeah, I mean, am I wrong? Do you think? I mean, I'll let you go after this, but am I wrong about that, or do you agree with me that it's important to not to be swayed by the personality and the personal how much we like her or Bernie Sanders, but that our role as progressives is to make the compromises hard, make sure those compromises that they inevitably make, that it's difficult for them to make those decisions.
No, I agree with you, and that was beautifully said. The Sylvia Plath imagery was less beautiful, but
The Bell Jar is an excellent book. I highly recommend it. I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but I don't. Did she?
I have read The Bell Jar. Yeah.
Did she? I know she killed herself. Did she put her head in an oven, or you're just mentioning suicide in general?
She did put her head in an oven. Last I heard. So.
Okay, so let's avoid being Sylvia Plath at the end. Let's be Sylvia Plath, the genius who does the smart thing, the brilliant author, and inspires people for generations. That metaphor doesn't work either. I really do need to work on these. Okay, well, I got to let you go, Emma. I love talking to you. I mean, I could talk to you about this stuff forever because it's so interesting and it's also super important. But I got to let you go. So thanks for joining me on Reporting in this week. Anything you want to tell the audience to look out for, or what they should watch for? What your YouTube channel they should like and subscribe below to, et cetera, you millennials?
Yeah, well, they're already members. I would tell them to sign up at tyt.com/Emma.
This also is on YouTube, so it's not just members who watch this. It's also the general YouTube audience.
There we go. Rebel HQ, tyt.com/Emma. You should be good to go.
Oh, that's right. tyt.com/Emma to become members, and for you to get credit for their membership. I'm not part of this competition, so I will throw my significant base of support behind you, Emma. Go, Emma. I'm on Team Emma.
Yeah, I mean, Cenk and Anna are going to wipe the floor with me, but I want to do a little respectably.
All right, hashtag Team Emma for we second-tier hosts, or you second-tier hosts, me 17th-tier hosts. All right, that's it for reporting in. Thanks so much, Emma. Thanks to the crew for tolerating me and putting up with the technical challenges we had today, which you hopefully didn't even notice. So I shouldn't even be bringing them up. This has been Reporting In, TYT's network show for progressive viewpoint on politics and reporting. Thank you for watching, and tune in next time. We're going to have another great show.